Hey guys, and welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be learning you how to tattoo a skull in black and grey realism, and I'm going to be running through tips and tricks to get this the best possible realistic skull we can do, and I'm going to run through with you from start to finish how to do that. I've done this design, and what I've done is I've found a skull that I really liked. Absolutely love this skull. I've used it quite a few times in different drawings and stuff, and I've put my own twist on it. I've added a bit of smoke and a crown of thorns and just adjusted the background a little bit. So I'm quite excited to do this today. We only need 3 needles, which I've got set out here, all killer ink needles, a 5 round liner, 14 round shader and a 13 mag. I'm going to be using my Inkjector Nano to do it all, which I really like. Absolutely spot on machine. And I've got my grey wash set out here ready. You'll see that in previous videos. I use that all the time and it's perfect. So yeah, let's get rolling with it. Enjoy. Right, okay. So to start with, I'm gonna get the liner out, and we're just gonna temp in some areas just really lightly that I want to mark it in. If you've watched previous videos, you'll know I don't really line things so harsh. So we're just going to temp in some lines to get started. And then we'll be straight onto the black and putting some of these areas in. Now I've used a speed stick for this stencil, which is the first time that I've used that, and it has been such a difference on the fake skin. I was using stencil stuff previously, but the stencil was so light and barely there, you were scared to tattoo it in case it rubbed off halfway through. But this has gone on like super dark and really clean. It's a little bit muddy, but when I wipe parts away, it's there a million times better than what it was with stencil stuff. So I'd highly recommend the speed stick. And it was actually someone who commented on one of my videos saying, have you tried this? And now I have, and it's perfect. I've got the reference here nice and close, so I can look at it as I go. And I'm going to be using the black even to mark in the light areas. So just skimming it on the surface rather than line it in so deep. And that'll create like a light grey rather than black. I'm on 11.3 volts on the power supply, and I've seen a lot of comments saying like, your volts are really high, is that what you'd recommend? And to be honest, it's a lot slower on the fake skin, but I use 11 volts all the time. On like day to day I use 11 volts roughly, and that can be the difference with your power supply. It might be a different power supply, it'd be the same speed on 7 volts. So what I'd recommend for you is to just run your machine, see how it sounds. You're gonna know if it's way too high volts because it'll sound crazy. And a good rule, what I used to do back in the day, was just to put it on your chin where the bar is, and that gives you a good idea of how hard it's gonna be hitting the skin. But yeah, let's get cracking. So what I'm trying to do at the moment is just line wherever is going to be black. So wherever I'm going to shade up to and make almost these lines disappear. I'm still not lining them harshly. I'm just kind of marking it all in. Now I've seen some comments and then people are asking if I'm kind of stippling the lines, and that's just because when you're looking at me doing it, I'm not just like consistently moving with the line. And what I'm doing is I'm kind of almost shading in, and it can be however I want to do them. It's not as such a certain movement or a certain way. It kind of changes depending on which part I'm doing. Like here it's lighter, so I'm going softer with it, and then as I can get into some little details here, I'm kind of dotting, and I think it's just whatever you find is best to get this a permanent stencil. But remember, just not going too hard. So the way I'm thinking about it is just trying to get that permanent stencil. You know, I don't want to get too carried away with the lines either, because there's going to be quite a lot of shading going into this and parts that I don't even need to line. I recommend also, when you're practicing on the fake skins, there's no harm in trying to literally skip the whole lining process and just start going in with the mag. Because a lot of these lines that I'm putting in now, they are just more so parts don't rub off, and that's the process that I'm used to. But with the liner, it is just getting them details in. But if you can go straight in with like a round shader to colour these parts, I would recommend trying that. It's really good practice. I think I'm just so used to this process, and it works for me, but the more and more that I do, the less that I seem to worry about the lines, and more just going straight in at it and having fun. I think that's where the style comes in, and the more loose that you can be with it, the more you'll put in your style. So like here, I'm just skimming in so lightly. And that is about all that we need. Just a couple more bits that I'm being picky with, and then I'm probably going to move on to the shading. So as you can see, there's not really many lines in a piece like this. Right, perfect. So I'm going to go in with the round shader next, not the mag at the moment, and I'm just going to start literally colouring in and temping a few shades in. So we're going straight in with the black, the world famous legendary black. And small little circles here, and just getting that nice block black in straight from the start. We've got the needle hanging right out here, same as the liner, and I really like working so I can see the needle. I'm not sinking it right in. I'm just working off the tip here. Now, I would recommend that when you're using these on real skin, that you just really slow your pace. They take a lot of practice before you can use them without overworking on real skin. They're very forgiving on the fake skin, but on real skin it is so easy to overwork with them. So just really take your time and don't go in too harsh with them. I probably recommend using them at the start more with like bits of script and stuff like that, where you can't go too wrong. This tutorial is more to show you the tips and the tricks, but it's more advanced learning with these kind of techniques. I wouldn't recommend as a beginner to start going in at a piece like this until you practice it a lot of times on fake skin. As I said before, the round shader is a lot of practice to get used to before you start using it on and like mixing it into your pieces on real skin. But hey, that's why this is here, to show you how to use it and where you can practice and get better using it. So I'm doing small little circles here, and that's just because I'm colouring in the black solid. And I'm doing one bit at a time. It's done, it's finished. I shouldn't really be coming back to these black bits, apart from sharpening up the edges. So I'm not worrying too much about getting right to the corners, because that's what the liner's for. It's a lot smaller needle. But where the black areas are and it fades out and you can see that, I'm literally rubbing it there and fading it out. That's how it'll look a lot more realistic as well. You don't want it too blocky. So where on here, like the tooth and the indent, it fades out and it turns to grey, I'm flicking that out already there. So I'm not going to be colouring all of this black in with the round shader. There's a big area here that I'm going to be doing with the mag probably. But in between all these teeth and getting the details, that's why I'm doing this bit now. So we're still on the round shader. I'm just knocking in some parts of black at the moment. Just trying to build it up. And then we'll probably go on to the mag. And that's where we can really get it to the point we can start having fun with it. But these sections here, they're gone block black and nice and solid. Now when you look at these on the picture, they are solid black. So wherever is solid black, it needs to go like that straight away. You're not building any parts up, you're not shading it and then making it black, because that's when it'll heal and not be right. You want it black straight away. And just try and be confident with it. Where it's black, put it in black. I know that sounds really easy, but when you're tattooing a real piece, it's actually quite scary knocking in these areas black straight away. Now, as you can see, the more black we get on, the more it starts to come to life already, and we haven't even put shade in yet. Don't be too neat when you're colouring in this black either. It wants to have a fade out, a bit of style in it. You can see here where I'm just flicking it and being a bit messy with it. And that will really help me when I come to putting some shades in. So I'm going to get these last couple of sections in, and then I'm going to start using the mag, I think. These are the parts where I can really go up into the corners, and that's why I'm using the round shader. Not for any big sections, mainly just the parts that kind of like they are the right needle for. Right, let's move on to the mag. So rather than the black, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to concentrate more on mapping in some shades. So the black's here ready to put in, but to give it that realistic look, you kind of want the fades in first. So I'll show you anyways and explain as I go. Perfect. So we start off with that really light grey. So extra light, light, one of them two. Get plenty of Vaseline on there. And I want the needle just hanging out, not really much at all. And what I'm doing here is I'm just literally rubbing it across the surface, almost that cross-hatch kind of effect. And I'm just going around the outline here. Because these parts up here, I don't want them outlined. So to give that effect, there needs to be a shade there. So once we're happy and we've got a bit on, I'm in with the medium now, and I'm literally just building it up layer by layer. So over one way and then over the next, just cross hatching it in. So I'm not going to get too carried away and go for that end result yet. I'm just marking that in. So that's there, the outline's there now. Well, not an outline, it's marked there. And then I'm going to move on to other parts. I'm going to skim a few shades in where I need them. Especially on the part here where the eye socket is. So what I'm doing, I'm not shading anywhere that's going to be black. I'm shading in the parts we need to get this into being like a permanent stencil. So anywhere where there isn't black or isn't an outline, but there is a shade there, like here, I'm putting in that really light shade just to get it to be there. And I'm just going with the light at the moment and just getting a little bit of a shade there. It doesn't need to be everywhere, but the parts that are important, try and get them in. Because the last thing that you want is the stencil disappearing and then you're left having to try and make it up. Right, cool. Now we're onto the black. So I'm putting the needle out a little bit more than what I would with the shade. Maybe you can see that there. And we're literally going to start blocking in these areas of black. And as you're doing this, you'll now see why you've shaded those areas just to be that little bit more prominent, because colouring in the black, what I'm doing now, is when them lines will start disappearing if they're gonna. But by shading them little bits and just flicking that tiny bit in it just backs that stencil up that little bit more. What I normally do now when I'm colouring in the black is I'll do a bit and then I'll just keep adjusting until when I'm colouring that it's just going in perfectly. So do a bit, adjust, and I just adjusted it then, and now I finally feel like that's colouring in absolutely bang on. So this looks quite fast on here, but on real skin I actually do it quite slow, and I'm just trying to get small little circles, and when I stop and wipe it, it needs to be perfect. Then you move on to the next bit. It needs to be solid black, done. You don't want to be building the black up, it wants to be done, finished, and you shouldn't be coming back to it. The fake skin, it is a bit different, so more than likely you probably will need to come back to it because it's hard work. But on a real person, I would never be coming back over the black unless it's on a complete different session to tattoo it. Now I see a lot of people when they're doing the black and grey pieces, they'll kind of work up from bottom to top or however they do it, but I just find with this way of doing it, you're doing all the black, you're not mixing between the inks and watering the blacks down, you're just getting it nice and solid, and that way it heals good. That's how I've found now that I'm mainly happy with the tattoos when they're coming back. It's because I've done it in this order and the black's healing up brilliantly. There's no differ between the shades because I'm using the exact same shades and wash every time. So I would highly recommend doing this order, but it's just preference and what you find better. So same technique on all of this black. We probably will skip ahead at this point because it is that same motion. I'm going to try and block in some of the black areas and then we'll go from there. Right, okay, now we have the black in, we move on to the more exciting part, and that's the shades. So I'm going to really try and learn you some of the techniques that I use to get this from just black all the way up to it looking really nice and realistic. Now if you've watched any of my other videos, you'll know that I kind of use the process for the same thing each time. Now obviously in this there's a lot of different techniques, there's a lot of textures which I'm going to start working through, but at the moment where I've marked in some of these shades, I want to start building them up before I start adding some textures. So we're going to start with like the medium grey, in between the medium and the light, and I'm going to just continue building some of these shades until I feel like I'm at a point where I'm happy to then start putting textures. So I'm literally just rubbing it on the surface here, just different directions each time. I don't want to go too light of a shade because I want it to use these parts as more of a finished shade as well. So I don't want to keep building and building. It wants to be getting more solid now. Now you can see on these black areas where I've left it quite patchy, and that's because I can subtly see some shades in there, so that's what I'm doing now, and that's just creating the depth. Now from this point on, each shade that you add, it should slowly start coming to life. I want to bring that needle in just a little bit. Now just keep skimming over and over, different directions. And I'm not sinking the needle right in here, I'm just literally rubbing it on the top. Now you can see here, for the more finer sections of shading, I'm just tilting the mag right on the edge and literally just using 2 or 3 of the needles rather than the full 13. And you can do that just to get up into the edges. Now it does take quite a while to build these shades up, and what I would recommend is trying to make the direction of your hand follow in the line of the shades. So here where it shades and then that fades out, I want to be going that same way with the needles, and then cross hatching over, but mainly the same direction in which it's going. We're going to start getting some light shades in over here. So I'm using the light wash. And continuing that process of marking it in and building it up. None of these are the finished shade yet. The more of just building up, getting it to how I want it to be for that next layer. Now most of all of these shades I can use pretty much any shade out of the palette. So I'm mainly using a medium here, but I can cross hatch it and the first layer will be like really light, and I can build that up probably to an extra dark. Try and stick with what shades that you want to get the final result with. So on here it is like a medium, so I'm using a medium and cross hatching to build up to a medium. And that's the way I see it in my head, is I'll use the shade that I'm building up to and just cross hatch it until it's right. Now because there's quite a lot of textures going in, I'm not getting too carried away at the moment. I'm building it up just under the shade that I want it to be. Because next I'll probably be using like a liner and a round shader to get those textures in. But as the more you build up, the more the stencil will fade, and the more your shades will then kind of start coming through. Don't worry about finishing a bit at a time. I just keep moving round and doing what I see as I see it, and marking it in. Now what I love about tattooing a skull is you can really let loose and put your style into it and kind of build all the shades up as and where you please, and just keep refining and refining until you're really happy. And then each shade that we're putting in now, it starts to really help the other parts. So we're shading here and there, and it's giving that nice white highlight of the under the eye socket. Right, we've got a bit more building up with these shades before we can then put some textures in. So I'm just carrying on shading and getting things a bit more solid, and like I mentioned before, the stencil will slowly start disappearing and we'll see our shade underneath. I'm really excited to get the textures in next, because I think it will really come to life once we can put the textures in and then get some detail. So I'm now just getting into some of the dark shades, and especially around the skull's eyes, where it is quite kind of patchy and smoky. You don't want to have these shades really light or smooth. It wants to be peppered in with the dark. I think that's the trick when it comes to something like this, is to not go too light with the shades. So I'm using the dark now and peppering it in and getting that deep look to it. Because the problem is, if you go too light with the shades, it all starts looking a bit too smooth and gives a funny effect. Whereas, as you can see on the picture, around the eye area, it's a lot of dark contrast shades. So even here, as you can see, I'm just cross-hatching away at these shades and giving that nice blurred look, but I'm still using the really dark shade. And just trying to flick it out so it's not sharp at all. That's another main thing there, is not having it so sharp. You want room to adjust and room to build upon them shades. Now, as you can see on the eye and other parts, I haven't brought it right down to that line where it goes, and that's really given me room to play around with the shade. And I'd say that with anything, I'd rather be on the inside of the shades than the outside. Now I'm really trying to look at this almost like a puzzle and just chipping away and doing one bit at a time. And if you can really see it in that basic 3 shades, so with the black, the dark grey, the medium grey, it starts to become a lot more simple to look at than trying to think about each individual part. So once I have them 3 shades down, near enough how they are now, I can then worry about the details. Now there's no textures underneath this at the moment, but once I can get them shades in place, I can focus on the parts where it's blending out, mixing them together. But my main concern at the moment is getting the shades correct and getting them in the right place. Now it's nice on parts like this where you've got the part in the middle of the eye and it's almost too light. That's fine. You can keep skimming over until you're happy with how it looks. The last thing you want is it too dark. So at the moment it's absolutely perfect. I can keep going over with that crosshatch motion until I'm happy with how it looks. So the same again on the nose. Getting that layer, that extra layers. So the main thing I'm looking at here when I'm shading is just getting them tones really obvious. So like I mentioned, and going a bit more into that, here, if I think about it really simply and just getting that a medium like how it is there, so just going over and being like, yep, that's medium, we're happy with that, move on, and then we can come back in and really start worrying about the blends. But to start with, it's more about getting the shades in the right place and the right shade. Now obviously it's a lot different when it comes to parts like here on the nose, where it's got a lot of texture and detail. So what I'm trying to do there is to just get a really basic shape of it being there, and that part I'm not going to build up overly much because I want to come in with the round shader and I want to get details in that part. So I'm not going to get too carried away with that part just yet. Now a good tip on this fake skin, and I think especially to get smooth shades, is having quite a bit of Vaseline on it. Because when it doesn't have the Vaseline there, the needles seem to catch quite a lot. Now on real skin you can really let loose with your shades, but on here you have to be so careful to get that even hit with the needles. Now on this part here on the background, you can see I'm kind of doing like a circular motion, and I'm using a light shade here, and I'm doing this because I find that gives me quite a blurry look and it fades it out all around rather than going back and forth with the cross hatching. Now this is just my preference, but I find it really helps, especially for areas where you're doing a bit of background. So I am still not completely sinking the needles. If you can hear that, it's just going on the top, but in a fast motion. It's took me a long time to be able to do this quite fast, but just starting out, I'd recommend you really concentrate on it more rubbing the surface than sinking your needles. And the more you can nail this down, the more smoother your shades will be. Especially for things like clouds, I think that really helps. Now a good tip here, when you're doing an area like this that is in the black, it's so easy to just start colouring it, but you've got to really slow down and just keep that cross-hatch process, because if you start colouring it, it'll give it a really horrible effect. So trust that when you're going over and cross-hatching it, it will build up to be the right shade. You don't need to rush and colour parts like that. So I'm still shading with the dark here, and I'm going back into where we have the black, the same as the other eye, and just trying to get that really deep saturation. So I wasn't too harsh with the black in some of these areas, so I have room to put these shades and get the right effect. I think if you just coloured it in with the black, it would look really cartoony. Right, so we're on to the round shader, and I'm going to get into these parts that I haven't been able to do with the mag, and just doing it little section by section. But I'm now working on some of these shades just before I start putting some textures in. So the same as what I do with the mag, I'm just cross hatching and building up a few shades. And this is also, it's kind of like getting the little shades that we can't with the mag, and then also putting in a couple of the textures that we can start to work on. I just find with the round shader you can get a lot more accuracy with the shades, so I'll use this and kind of a mix between this and the mag, and I can use this for like as bigger areas as I want. See here where I'm kind of whipping it right out, and using that for some of the bigger areas and blends as well. But I'm also trying to fade the black out here, and then just to kind of bring it into the textures. I'm just using between a medium and a dark at the moment. You can see some of these shades aren't really smooth, and that's why I want to use this round, just to get in to all the areas and give it that exact shade that I want. So where the purple is here, I'm just shading over the top really lightly and getting that effect. And just look at the picture as closely as you can when you're doing it, and try your best to kind of match the shade and the effect. The stencil really does help with kind of giving you a lot of guidance on how to put the textures in. And obviously the harder that I'm pressing, the darker the shade will be as well. So on parts like on the nose, I want to be quite cautious, and then as it becomes deeper into the black, I can press a lot harder. Now, as you can see, it's really starting to take shape and effect now. I find the round shader really helps me progress through the stages. It's nice to be able to go in and refine and get the shades exactly how you want them. And I think once you've practiced enough with this, it's so good for hitting most of the areas. I am going to go in with the mag after the textures, and I'll use that mainly for the background, but I feel like the round shader is a really key tool to get in the detail in a tattoo. I'm pretty excited for this purple to start fading as well. It'll be really nice when that goes a bit more, the more we tattoo it, and then the more that fades, the more white the skull will look, which will make such a difference. Right, I'm going to start up on the fawns, and I'm going straight in with a round shader. You don't need a liner for this part, and I'm doing it like this because I want to come in at the end and have some of them really sharp that are in the foreground, and then some that are quite blurry in the distance. So by doing it this way, I can keep the ones that I want blurry, and then I can sharpen up and make some of them quite sharp. So all I'm going to do to start with is the black. And I can taper it out and get some shades out of the black, to be honest, but yeah, so any shades that I'm going to be doing here is probably going to be with the black to start off with. I mean, try and get the points as sharp as you can, and I'm just flicking them out here, but I'm not going to worry about them until I come in with a liner, and then I can even shade them with a liner, rather than, I don't want them all dark either. So a big tip throughout this whole piece is the round shader is key for doing a lot of the work. Obviously not the big areas, but to get in the detail, getting things nice and sharp, the round shader has helped so much to bringing this piece together. It would be such a struggle to get things as sharp as they are without it, to be honest. You'd spend hours and hours with a liner trying to give this same effect. And then now I'm going to go in with the dark shade for the one that's just behind. And instead of using the black, I'm just on the dark here and just being a bit more soft with the needle. I just want that one to be sat back ever so slightly, so I'm not going to use black. And then continuing on with the darks to get some more shades in the front ones on the parts that isn't the black. Now these aren't the focal point of the piece, so there's only going to be some parts that are quite sharp, and that's probably this spike and maybe another one. So I'm mainly going to do these with the round shader and try to have them quite stylized and blurry. Right, so I'm going to focus now with you on some tips and techniques on the next part, which involves quite a lot of shading. So I've got the mag set out here, and I'm not sure if you can see right there, but it's just ever so slightly sticking out, maybe a couple of millimetre maximum. And we're going to focus in on this part of the shading here, and then kind of move around and get quite a lot of the shades in to build it up before we put some textures. So I'm going in with the light here, and literally on these parts here where I want it to be quite subtle, because it is like a drop shadow of the fawns, so I don't want it too harsh. So that's my main focus, is not having it too harsh. So that's why I'm going in with the light, that I can then build up to a medium. But we're going to go in here and I'm just literally skimming it on the top. So I need quite a bit of Vaseline on these. But if I can just skim it on the top like that, and then back the other way, but the opposite direction. Now you can let your hand go quite a bit when you're doing something like this. You don't have to be so jagged like that. As long as it's scraping on the top and going that way and then the other. And kind of when you're brushing it, you want to flick it and flick up either way, so you don't have like a sudden stop of your shades. And you can see that's what I'm doing here, but a lot more faster. And then right across, and it's just getting that flick out, and that'll really help a lot. The last thing you want is the shades to be really blocky, or you can see the needle marks, especially with something like a shadow. Now you don't want to sink your needles and rub it like this, because it'll be well too harsh. You want to just literally skim on the top and flick it out. Now when you're tattooing a person, it'll go in a hell of a lot faster than when you're tattooing on the fake skin. So that's why this technique works really, really well for everything. The stencil's really prominent on here, and on real skin when you're tattooing a person, it can be quite prominent as well. And my advice would be is getting that layer and almost building it up and not going too dark that first pass. Now you can see there's a bit of a shade there. It's not dark enough yet, but as I rub and tattoo away, the stencil will fade and you'll be able to see underneath whether or not you want to go darker. That can be quite an issue when it comes to the shades. I've found especially, you'll tattoo it and then you almost want the stencil to disappear with the shading, and you have to hold yourself back from that because it can easily go too dark. So when I'm using the light here, I can build it up to a medium. I'd rather it much more subtle than too dark. And that goes for pretty much any shade. You want to build it up to the shade that you're going for. So even if it's just that one tone lighter, I'd rather be using the light and build it up to a medium than use the medium and it become, you can see the marks or anything like that. Now a lot of the time I can almost get it smooth enough just going that one way. I don't have to almost cross hatch too much, and I am trying to keep the line and follow where it's going as well. So you can see I'm going that direction and then across. Now obviously the more you pass over it, the darker it will get. And what I'm doing here, I'm kind of blending out the more darker shades while I'm there. So I'm using the light tone and I'm just fading out where the darks are now. And that doesn't have to be even coming right from it. I'm literally going into it and then flicking it out. So the more passes that you do over, the darker it'll be. And as well, the more slower and the more precise you get it, the darker it'll be. And the more you press. There's a lot of different techniques there and a lot of different ways that you can do it. You can see here where I'm on a new bit, and this bit's had a few passes now and this bit's just new. And that's even the same for the parts where we're doing a lot more bigger areas. You're just going along a lot more. So you see there, that's had one pass, and I'll dab it and there's barely anything there at all. And this is still with the light. So this bit here is a tiny bit darker, so I've passed over that. Then I'm going right over the top. So how I build the shades up is exactly there, and what I'm going to do is just kind of go in the whole lot and pass over, and as parts wipe off I build it up more. Now I'm still going with the light. This bit here is a little bit darker, so I'm going to dip in with the medium. Now between all the shades that I'm using here, like I've mentioned previously, I could shade with a extra dark, and one pass will almost give me like a light tone. Because they're mixed with black, it is just like you're almost spraying dots. So when I'm tattooing real people, it gives a really nice peppery effect. So using this technique, you could use pretty much any shades you want, but obviously where it's darker, it is easier to use the more darker shade. I wouldn't recommend building the light right up to extra dark. Obviously, I'd use probably one shade down from what you're going for. Now that isn't with everything that I would do, but to be honest, the bulk of all this is that technique. And by doing this, you can see exactly how your shade is, and it should heal pretty much exactly how you've put in using these washes. It shouldn't really lighten up whatsoever. With a lot of other grey washes that I've used, they do lighten up quite a lot, whereas using these washes and this technique, it's nice because you're pretty much exactly how it's going to look when it's healed. So what I'm thinking when I'm doing these pieces and on real skin is I'm practicing all the time, and that's how far I can push the skin, knowing that it's going to heal right. So I guess for me it's just practicing what shade works the best for building it up, how to give it a certain look. Because obviously the more layers you can get, the better it will be and the smoother it will be. Now with a piece like this, obviously the skull is really contrasting quite white, so wherever it is light, I want to not shade it at all, or if anything it'll just get one pass over. So like the bits above the brow or under the eye socket, I want to keep that totally white, and that won't be, it either won't be or will barely be shaded. Now you can see here where I'm building up the parts that I've already done and just giving it that extra layer, and kind of just keep going at that until you feel it's right. And also where we want, for example, it to go from darker to lighter, I can pass over here and then gradually, so the needles don't even touch. So quite deep here, and then lighter until it barely scrapes. And you can do that any direction. And to really get up to them corners, what I'm doing is I'm just using the corner of the mag. So where I'm up to now with the shades, I will be going off the mag in a minute, and I really want to get some textures in, and I'm not almost getting too carried away with the final shades on here. Obviously up here won't have any, but near the brow and stuff like that, I really want to get some textures in to kind of build up that shade to be at the point where I'm happy. So I'm not going to put too much shade in that I can't fit in some of these textures. So I've left quite a few parts in here and around here where I want to get in with the liner to build it up onto that last part. Then I might go over with the mag if it's not quite as dark as what I want it to be. But as you can see, it's as simple as that with the mag and the shades, and it's just about building it up with the right amount of passes, cross-hatching it the different direction to get it smoother. And the main thing is not having a sudden stop to your needle, is to have it so it flicks out, and that way you can easily blend it and it won't look too harsh. Now, as you can see, when I do it here, I have been doing it a very long time, and that's why I'm doing it a hell of a lot faster, just because I've really got that technique down. But if I slowed it right down, that is what I'm doing. Okay, so I've given it a good wipe and a bit of the purple's come off now, and I'm going to focus in on getting a few of the details and textures in on the skull. So I'm going to start off with the liner and just trying to give the effect that it is on the picture. And when it comes to the tattooing, it's not going to be exactly the same, and you're not aiming for it exactly how it is on the picture. what I'm trying to do is give the effect as it translates into a tattoo, to give that effect. So more with little dots and little scratches to give that kind of skull look to it. And I'm also, while I'm at it, I'm going to go in and get some of the details and get things right up to the edges that I haven't even done yet. So what I've mainly done here is the shades to create each bit so it's on there. So now that I'm at this stage, I can really have fun with it and put some details in. So as you can see, I'm not almost lining, I'm just kind of dabbing away and then getting things to the edges. I think the kind of the dotty effect gives that detail, so I do use that technique quite a lot. And what I can also do is shade with the liner, which is what I'm doing right now. So some parts I don't want it to be black, so I'm more just skimming the surface. Exactly the same as what I would do with the mag. You can see here the shades, it's giving me like a shaded look. And I'm still using the black, I'm just literally skimming the top. And like what I mentioned earlier, you could almost give it a light tone with just skimming over the surface. Now try and copy the picture best you can, obviously when you're looking at it, but it is more just giving that same look and same texture. And obviously the harder I press, the more dark it will be. So there's some bits that I'm going quite light, and then some bits like a real lot heavier. I think for this part for me is like where the skull really comes to life, and then the next stage is like just getting it more saturated. But for me, this is where all the detail comes in and where I can really enjoy it. And what I really like the shading with the liner as well. So for all these tiny bits, I just think it's really good practice and it's fun to do. But it's like if you think about it, it's like a really tiny mag, and you can get all those details and little cracks with this needle. That's looking way better. You will notice, like, the more that you sharpen things up, you'll just be dying to put that shade over and get it more and more. But for me, it's all about getting the textures in first, then shade over the top, and that's why I haven't shaded the whole thing. It's just giving me room to add those textures before I put some of the parts in. And I have planned this out before and looked at the piece and really studied where I want to do and which part first. And that, for me, that is a part that you do look at and you do have to plan. And for me, how I do plan these parts is by looking at where the textures are and where I want to shade up to. And I don't want to be shading over a part that I will have prominent textures, like on here. So I've shaded this part, it'll have a couple, but here where it's a really main part of the tattoo, when you look at it side by side, there is quite a bit of textures in there, and the nose, which I've left, and then other parts like down here. So, whereas the big bulk of the shades, they're put in, and it makes it a lot easier for me to look at. Right, so we're going to get in with the mag and do some darkening up and a couple more layers, and we're not actually far away now from the finished product. So what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of smoothing some areas out, just getting things a little bit more saturated and blended out, I guess, wherever I feel needs it. And I guess at this point I can just really go in and pick at any details. I want to get a few more textures in on it. So I guess at this point it's just about really having fun, getting a bit of style into the piece. And yeah, the whole thing's on there now, so I can really start playing around with bits that I want darkened. It's really nice when it's at this point as well, because when you step back and have a look, you can really see where needs that little bit more of a shade. So which is kind of what I'm doing now. I'm just deepening a couple of the shades and just kind of seeing what I think needs that little bit more just before I put the white highlights in. It's quite nice up here where it is more blurry on the thorns that are behind. I can shade right over the top and it'll kind of soften and deepen all of the shades at once then, which kind of gives that more of a blurry look. So I'm hitting just with a medium and a light shade here and just going right over the top of all of the thorns and the background. It does look quite messy when you're doing it, but then when you wipe it, you see it just kind of blurs them shades in together, and that's what I'm aiming for there. So I wouldn't do that on the front thorn because I want that to be quite forward, but on the back I'm just kind of shading over all of them. And then a really light pass on the head. As you can see, the more that we pass over, the more saturated it looks, and it's really starting to come together now. So just kind of build up as you see and what you think needs doing. Right, I'm pretty happy with how the shades are now. The only bits that I do want to do a little bit more on is the textures. I want to get as much detail in as I can. So I'm probably going to start now with the liner and literally just pick at any little bits and anywhere I can get some really nice textures, and then we'll be on to the white highlights for the finish. Now there isn't any particular order of doing this. Once you get to that stage of all the shades being in. So once we have that basic illustrated look, like I mentioned previously, so once your black's in and you've mapped in the shades, you can literally go from there with however you feel best to put the details in, which parts that you want to do. So like what I'm doing now is just the bits that I feel I want to do or want to add a little bit more. So if I've got the liner, I might then go into the nose or into the details and kind of move around and build up wherever I feel needs a little bit more from here. I do find that kind of dotty effect is pretty good for like doing a skull. Little dots and little lines. That seems to be what I'm doing here to try and go for that effect. And even the stipple can be quite good, so it's not all the same. And when I'm doing the stipple effect, I'm literally just flicking it across the surface. And you can go as wide as you want with it, or even quite small. And that'll give you lots of little dots. You do have to press it quite hard on here, but when you're tattooing a person, you can flick them dots in and they'll go in very fast. I really do like exaggerating quite a few of these shades as well, especially like under the ridge of the nose or the eye. Some bits I'll even do them a little bit more than what's on the picture, just to really make the shadows pop on it. Let's just try and get you a little up close shot of what I'm doing with the liner here. So I'm not going in deep at all. I'm literally just scratching along the surface. Cross hatching, little dots. Kind of a mix of everything here, just to give that really grainy textured effect. And I'm also, while I'm doing this, I'm I'm trying to follow the direction of how I want it to go as well. So if you'll notice, I am heading down this way rather than across, because that's kind of the direction that the shading's going. I don't want to get too carried away here either. And the bits that have a bit more blur look to them, you know, for example the cheekbone, I'm not going to put much texture in that really, and I'll let that kind of fade back. Some more little dots and lines up here as well. And you do have to be quite cautious with this because you don't want it to be too harsh that you end up putting a line in by accident. So I'd rather be too subtle than too harsh with bits like this. And even like what I'm doing here is I'm doing it being a bit cautious, giving it a wipe, see what's there, and then I know how much harder I need to press for the next go. Bit of a stipple. I quite like this bit here on the picture where it's a bit of a stipply, it's a shade over a bit that's quite rough. So I want to get a bit of that going on in the shade here as well. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, so that bit was a little bit light, so we're going again. And it's quite good because even though it's light, it still gives you a little bit of something as well. Now this is looking crazy textured now, I'm really happy with it. Give that a bit of a fade out with some stipples. I really like that stipple effect on the skull, it gives a good look, especially for areas that are quite big and just need that little bit of a texture but not over much. It's quite nice to blend up into these shadows as well. Right, now that we're happy, we're going to get some white highlights in. So I've got a fresh needle out here. I've actually got a 3-liner, just because I want them really nice and sharp. And we're using dynamic white ink. And I'm just going to really bring out some of these textures that we've put in, and get some highlights in. quite good actually for some of these cracks and stuff. You can really get them to kind of pop. Because some of them are quite hard to see when you put them in at first, so the white really does help to bring them out. And then even where we've put these textures, just going in between them with the white, I find that gives like a really nice effect. You can see here it's bringing the textures out like a lot more. I wouldn't go too harsh with the white at first. It's more just to make them stand out, so you're almost shading in with some of the white. And you can see here now it's starting to give quite a cool, like bone textured look that I'm aiming for. And some of these textures that weren't quite enough there before are now really starting to come to life. And then bits that are a lot bigger, like up here, I'm just kind of stippling in a little bit of a shade so it's there. And there we have it. We are done. I'll give it a proper wipe down and then I'll let you see how it is.